What do you think? Come on, we make this video? The camera's so far away, I hope it doesn't turn off. Alright, well, I better start talking. Hey guys, long time no see. Got a bit of a fussy, cranky pants over here. Say hi. He's not happy. This is Donny. Donny is our son. Oh, I know. This might be a terrible time to film this, but I've been trying to film it for 2 weeks and I haven't been able to, so we're just gonna go with it. Donny is our son who was born on January 30th, 2018. 6 pounds, 14 ounces, 20.5 inches long. And today I'm going to share with you my labor and delivery story because I actually got to labor this time around. Haha! Huzzah! If you're not familiar, I have a 2-year-old, Charlotte, who goes by Cece. And I will link her delivery story for you guys if you want to check it out. That'll also be in the description. But I had to have a C-section with her, which was not terribly planned. It wasn't like an emergency C-section, but it, oh honey bear, shh, 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 but it wasn't planned either. You're right, boo. Do you want your binky? Okay, let's have a Mr. Binky. It wasn't an emergency C-section, but it wasn't a planned one either. She was breech, and then I ended up having low amniotic fluid, and I had to deliver her at just 38 weeks via C-section. And I, of course, had been really hoping for a vaginal delivery. I know some people elect to have C-sections, and I'm sure they have their reasons, but I personally would not elect to have major surgery if I had the option not to. That's just my personal opinion about it. A C-section is a major surgery. You have to stay in the hospital for anywhere from 3 to 5 days, which is a long time. And it's a long recovery. It's a major surgery. And while mine went really well and there were no complications and my recovery went really well, you know, oh boy, you have so many things to say. He's a little gassy, so I apologize. He's a grunter. He might grunt throughout this entire video, but I gotta film it now. Anyway, you know, it was a process recovering, and I knew this time around, especially having a 2-year-old and a husband who has some physical ailments that make it difficult for him to lift and carry our 2-year-old, who's perfectly capable of walking and carrying herself anywhere. But you know, 2-year-olds, they still like to be held, they still like to be carried. My husband Don, honey, you're okay, I promise. My husband Don has a bad back and a bad shoulder, and anyway, I knew that it would be obviously for more than just my own personal reasons of not wanting to have another major surgery, it would be really great to have a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. And that's what I was really hoping for. Of course, I couldn't plan on that. I couldn't plan for it. There was always going to be a possibility, maybe a higher possibility of me having to have a repeat C-section just based on the circumstances surrounding my first delivery with Charlotte. But my pregnancy, you know, progressed really well. I had no complications at all. Donny was always in great health in utero. And when I went for my 36-week scan and found out he was head down, I was over the moon. Not only was he head down, but I had ample amniotic fluid. So like, oh darling, I had everything on my side for, you know, heading towards a vaginal delivery. Of course, not having my hopes up about it really helped. I think kind of just keeping my expectations in check helps me in general with my personality. So I went into delivery always knowing that a C-section was a possibility. And I even packed my hospital bags accordingly, and I will share a video on that soon because I got some requests for that, what I packed in my hospital. Honey bear. Shh, shh, shh. You're okay, I promise. I promise you're okay. He just ate. He's not hungry, just a little upset about the gas situation. Anyway, So because of the circumstances surrounding my first pregnancy and also the my age, I turned 35 on January 28th of this year, so my due date was like early February, so they knew I'd be 35 at the time of delivery. And apparently as soon as you reach that magical age, you're considered old as bricks for being a pregnant person. They call it advanced maternal age. I think they used to call it geriatric pregnancy, which was much worse sounding. So advanced maternal age doesn't sound as condescending, I suppose. But anyway, I knew my doctor had told me that she would want me to go for weekly non-stress tests at the hospital starting at 36 weeks. And then they also wanted me to do an ultrasound at that time to check on the amniotic fluid and the position of the baby. So 36 weeks, I went to my first one. Everything went great. Everything checked out great. He did great in the non-stress test. No biggie. And then I also, in addition to that, had weekly appointments with my OBG, and that was really more just to check in. 37 weeks, the ultrasound went great. Everything looked fine. Amniotic fluid was great. He was still head down. But in the non-stress test, everything was fine until there was a little blip in which his heart rate decreased quite dramatically, according to the reading, and then went back up. So they were a little bit concerned about that. So they actually checked me into labor and delivery and monitored me for 3 additional hours. Non-stress test is usually about 20 minutes. So I hung out there for a few hours. We weren't sure if we were going to have to deliver, what was going on, if he was in stress or something. Turns out it ended up being just like a human error, like the machine. The nurse had kind of been shifting the monitor on my belly around at the time of the dip. And that's why it dipped. It wasn't actually him. His readings were great throughout that whole entire 3-hour period. But they didn't want to, they wanted to err on the side of, did you just drop that? They wanted to err on the side of caution, so that's why they had me monitored. But we ended up, spending a few hours in the hospital at 37 weeks, and I just, interestingly enough, that was a Thursday, and the Wednesday before that, which is the day that I turned 38 weeks. Wait, did I skip a week? I'm getting my weeks confused. I didn't start the non-stress test till I was 37 weeks, and then the next week was my second one. I was just 38 weeks. And the night before, I had had a really rough night. I had just not slept well. I had felt really ill kind of all day, where my back had been really hurting. I had no back pain during my entire pregnancy, and all of a sudden that day my lower back was killing me all morning, and then by midday it started coming in waves instead of being constant, and then by the evening time he's kind of moved to the front to feel more like cramps, which can be, can be contractions. So I chalked it up to just being Braxton Hicks, which I never even had with Charlotte, but that was as far into pregnancy as I got with Charlotte, was to 38 weeks, so maybe I would have had them if I had been pregnant with her for longer, I don't know. And then I just basically couldn't sleep all night because I was having these Braxton Hicks contractions, and they weren't regular, so I didn't think about them, but they were frequent. It was like maybe like 6 to 10 minutes for just like maybe like 45 seconds or so, but they weren't regular, and they say if they're not regular, it's, you're not in labor. But I just didn't feel well, and I still continued to not feel well the next day, and actually when I was hooked up to the non-stress test for all that time, they could see I was contracting because they have a contraction monitor up. But again, they knew that they didn't think I was in like actual labor because they weren't consistent. And I even saw my OBG, she stopped by to see me when I was at the labor and delivery ward that day, and she said, well, it's possible you could have to deliver today, but what I think is that you're in latent labor, which is basically just early stages of labor, which can last several weeks. I was like, okay, so basically it's just Braxton Hicks, and she was like, yeah. So after that, I had actually had a sitter that afternoon lined up, which really worked out because I had appointments already in place to go see my acupuncturist, which I saw every other week throughout my pregnancy, and a chiropractor I saw for the entire duration of my 3rd trimester, just to make sure my pelvis was in line, to help with the my uterus being kind of balanced, because that was part of the issue with my my first pregnancy, and I tend to go out of whack in my pelvis naturally. And I swear by both. They helped incredibly. And both of those, I decided to continue to go to those appointments even after a long morning at the hospital. And both of them helped me relax and calm down so much, because I was just really kind of anxious about the whole thing, just the way it all played out. And, I was just so unsure if he was okay, and then we found out he was fine. It was just the nurse shifting the thing around, and it was just a long morning, and I hadn't had any sleep, and I felt so much better after that. I still had the Braxton Hicks, but they weren't nearly as frequent. It was very few and far between, and the back pain at that point had totally dissipated, and it was just all in the front. And I was like, things are starting. I think, it might not be this weekend, but maybe next week we'll have a baby. I was right. And actually, Don and I betted with each other. He thought I wasn't going to have a baby till February. At this point, it was late January. It was right before my birthday. And I called the day. I said, I bet I'm going to have the baby on Tuesday. And Tuesday was January 30th, which is the day he was born. I don't know how I called that, but I did. So anyway, that weekend, we played it very easy. We took it easy at home. We celebrated our birthdays, because it was my birthday on Sunday and Don's birthday is on February 1st. So we celebrated our birthdays with our families, at a very low-key kind of thing at my in-laws' house. You are okay, my little love. You are okay. You are not happy. This is very typical for him. He's just, I'll talk more about this when I do a 1-month update, you guys, but he's kind of a little bit of a fussy pants. It's okay. It's okay. Binky helps a lot. Charlotte never took a Binky. I call a pacifier Binky, and he does, which is really, really a godsend. Anyway, I digress. So we had a really low-key weekend. I continued to have the Braxton Hicks, but I felt pretty much fine. They weren't regular or anything, or even very frequent. And then we had this little party on Sunday evening at my in-laws' house, and when we got home, I started to feel like they were coming on more frequently again. And I had another rough night where I just had trouble sleeping, and I was like, something's happening, something's kicking up again. It felt a lot like that Wednesday night prior, where I just couldn't sleep, and I had them every 5 to 10 minutes, and it was just really uncomfortable. So I had a really rough night sleeping, and throughout this from Wednesday to Monday, I basically didn't eat anything. I just didn't feel well. I just felt really kind of icky. And I ended up, I think I lost 5 pounds in 5 days, which is actually kind of a lot. When I told my OBG this, she was like, wow, that's not good. But then I delivered, and it was fine. I gained 35 pounds in my pregnancy, so I lost 5 of those pounds before I even delivered, just because I just wasn't hungry and I couldn't eat. I just didn't feel well. So anyway, Sunday night was rough, and then Monday I felt a little bit of a reprieve. I still felt really off, but a little bit better. And actually, I remember I was so tired. Then I was talking to Don about it. He was at work. We text constantly throughout the day when he's at work. And he was like, I'm going to call my mom and see if she wants to come over and help out with Cece. And I just didn't want to ask, but she came over and she hung out with Charlotte, and I had a chance to take a nap, and that was good. And it just, I knew it, I just felt really off. But, you charge on, you do what you do. So, we had dinner, and I was running Charlotte's bath, and I started her bath routine, and I stood up after, when it was time to get her towel, to get her dry out of the bath, and my water broke. Now, it wasn't like this dramatic gush all at once, like a lot of people say it is. For me, it came out very consistently in kind of smaller amounts for several hours, for a long time, actually, for maybe 4 or 5 hours. It just kept coming out. But it was indistinguishable. I knew it wasn't that I had peed myself. I didn't have any issue with incontinence during my pregnancy or postpartum so far, thank you goodness, because knock on wood, I've been very diligent with my Kegel exercises. Yeah, it was indistinguishable. I knew what it was, even though it wasn't the gushy thing. And even though I didn't want to upset Charlotte, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. So I actually carried on with her bedtime routine. Luckily, I already had like a pad on, just because, this might be TMI, but I just made a lot of, you make a lot of discharge when you're pregnant. I made so much with this pregnancy, so much more than I ever did with Charlotte. This is something they don't tell you. And I'm sorry if it's TMI. It's part of pregnancy. You're watching a delivery video. It's gonna get a little icky at some points. But I wish somebody had told me about that because I didn't know it was normal. But yeah, I ended up for my 3rd trimester having to wear a pad every day, because just so I didn't have to like go through so many pairs of underwear and do so much laundry. Anyway, that kind of held that together for me for the rest of, the 20 minutes that I was drying Cece off and doing her lotions and getting her PJs and potty and toilet, and those are the same things, potty and toothbrush, and then, we do our stories and our songs and all that. And I did the whole bedtime routine. I'm so glad I got to do that, and get her down. And then I basically like zoom out of her room after I've gotten her down, and I go to Don, and I'm like, my water broke. And he was like, oh. So I called. It was, the evening by that point. The doctor's office was closed, but you can talk to the doctor on call through an answering service. So I called, and I spoke to the doctor on call, who called me back right away. And I explained the course of events of the past, 5 days, and how my water had broken. And she agreed that it sounded like that. And she said, well, and I said how frequently my contractions were coming, even though they weren't regular by any means. They were still coming probably every, they were coming every 3 to 6 minutes for about 45 seconds long. She's like, well, I would wait a couple of hours before coming to the hospital. Take a shower, do whatever you need to do, have a rest, eat something, or, whatever you need to do, and then come in. Because you're just going to be sitting there for a while, I think, otherwise. Since I never got to labor with my first, they kind of treated me as like a first-time mom in terms of my body progressing. Like, my cervix never delivered a baby, even though I have a baby because of the C-section, and I never had any labor with her. So they thought it would take a little bit longer. And I had only been 1 centimeter dilated on that Thursday prior. So I took a shower, like I did my whole nighttime skincare routine. I like made sure I had everything I wanted to bring. I remember I threw laundry in. I did like 2 loads of laundry. I did the dishes. I tidied up the house. I just like kind of prepared as if I was going out of town. About 9 o'clock that evening, Don and I drove to the hospital, and the doctor had called beforehand and let them know I was coming, so they were all ready for me, and I had pre-registered, so I didn't have to fill out any paperwork or do any of that. They checked me in, they got me all settled in the room, and they hooked me up to the monitor to monitor the baby and see my contractions and stuff. They were still irregular, but they were definitely frequent enough. And they didn't want to check my cervix until it was absolutely necessary, because my water had broken. They did test that my water had broken, which was just a swab test that they like put in some, they put in some sort of solution to see. And it was definitely my water had broken. So once your water breaks, it just makes more possible for you to have infection, or, because it's just more open to infection and things like that. So they don't want to go in there unless they absolutely have to. So they didn't want to check my cervix till later. They wanted me to labor a little bit first. And it kind of stayed the same for the first hour or so we were there. And then by like 10:30, 11, things started to pick up. And I started to feel like I was really laboring. Now, because of my history with a previous C-section, they wanted me to have an epidural. They strongly encouraged it. Of course, they're not going to force you to do anything that you don't want to do, but they strongly encouraged it, because in the event that I needed an emergency C-section, then I would at least have that in place and I wouldn't have to be knocked out completely. Because with an emergency C-section, you generally have to have general anesthesia because they don't have time to do a spinal. So I knew I was going to have an epidural. I probably would have elected to have one anyway, because I personally don't have an issue with epidurals, and I think they're a really nice thing. I know everybody has different opinions on them. That's my personal standpoint. So they wanted to get me on fluids, and just like with Charlotte, when I delivered Charlotte, it took 3 people to get the IV thing in one of my veins. Apparently I have what they call thin veins, and I remember in my like delirious contraction haze making some stupid joke about how that was the only thin thing about me at the moment, because I was like super pregnant and felt like a whale. Nobody thought that was funny. It's not funny. Pregnancy humor, not funny. Anyway, so one nurse tried, blew the vein. Another nurse tried it in my wrist. Another nurse tried in my hand, in my left hand, blew that vein out. So finally, the IV specialists, no, what do they call it? The people who like specialize in putting it, like doing needle stuff, I can't remember what they're called now off the top of my head, had gone home for the night. They stopped working at 11 p.m. So they actually called the anesthesiologist resident who was there for the evening and had him put it in. I actually still have a little bloop. He got it right away, but it actually took him a little bit longer, I think, than he was expecting, because he came in all cocky, like, I'm going to do this, it's going to be so easy, and it took him like 15 minutes to get it, but he got it, and they started me on fluids. It turned out that I was super dehydrated, and I remained dehydrated throughout the whole night, because of the small, they had to put the IV in my hand, because that's the only vein that they could access, and use a really small needle. Like, I couldn't take a lot of fluid in at once. And I think by like early morning they figured out that there was like some sort of kink in the tube or something, so it took a long time to get hydrated. But anyway, that's not really that important to the story. So by 11 things started to pick up, and I was feeling really icky. And I remember it was about 11, it was like right after the IV went in. That didn't bother me or whatever, but I was just feeling really sick, and I actually threw up. And I never vomit, you guys. I never, ever, ever vomit. I hate it, and I will avoid it at all costs, but I couldn't help it. I threw up, and that's when I knew, like, I was really, 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 really in labor, because I knew I wouldn't throw up if I wasn't. And I asked to be put on like a mobile monitor so I could walk around a little, because I just couldn't be in that room anymore. I needed some air. I needed to get out, so they hooked me up to this little mobile monitor so they could still monitor the baby's heart rate. And I could like wheel around this little thing with me. And Don and I walked up and down the halls together. I should mention that my in-laws spent the night at our house. Charlotte obviously was already asleep before we left, which was really great. Like, the timing was impeccable, how all the timing worked out. It was great. But they came and spent the night, and then were with her in the morning to help her, you know, get up and get ready, and they were with her that day. Anyway, where was I? Right. So we were pacing up and down the halls, and things were getting really intense, really fast. And I felt like things had just accelerated so quickly. And they had told me they were going to check my cervix after they put the epidural in when I was like fixed in bed, because with the epidural I got, I wasn't going to be in bed with that. So we headed back to the room at about 11:30, and I was like, let's call for the epidural, because it might take a while and things are really picking up. And I don't want to miss the window and have to have general anesthesia in the event of an emergency C-section. So the resident anesthesiologist came back. He put the epidural in around midnight. And by this time I was so exhausted. I hadn't slept the night before, and I hadn't been sleeping well for that whole, you know, like the 5 or 6 days leading up to that. And I hadn't eaten, and I was very dehydrated. I was just very weak. So it was really nice. The epidural took effect pretty quickly. I had a spinal with Charlotte with my C-section, which is a little bit different. I don't really understand. I don't know like the medical difference, but it is. I think it's just a little bit more. It's like from your chest down instead of just from your like abdomen down. I don't really know, but it took a little bit of time to go into effect, but once it did, probably within about 15 minutes, I felt so much better. And Don actually settled in and was able to get some sleep in the really uncomfortable looking chair that they had in the room. And we kind of lowered the lights, and the nurses said, we won't, oh, I didn't mention, at the time, after the epidural, the midwife on call that night, or doing whatever, who was there that night, came in and checked my cervix, and I was 4 centimeters dilated, which was a lot more than 1, but still not quite there. But I just knew that things were progressing quickly. I could tell, with no experience in laboring, I could just tell. Anyway, we lowered the lights. The nurse said they wouldn't check on us too much during the night. They'd just they'd keep an eye on the monitors and let us get some rest. And so I tried really hard to sleep. I slept a little bit, but there was some poor lady in the room next to us who had elected not to have an epidural, was just screaming in complete misery every couple of minutes for like basically the whole night. And that just, I couldn't sleep through that. I was just like, I just couldn't sleep through it. I was just horrified for her, and just felt so blessed to not be in that much pain. I did get a couple of hours close to the early morning, so like between 4 and 6 I think I slept. And at 6 a.m. the nurses started coming in again and checking vitals, taking blood, doing tests, blah blah blah. And at this point, they checked my cervix again, 10 centimeters dilated. So I made so much progress overnight. The epidural worked fabulously. I didn't feel any discomfort at all. I could feel the contractions, not all of them. I could really only feel the stronger ones, but definitely it worked. And the baby was in a good position, not fully all the way down. He was, I think, I'm trying to remember the terminology they used. He was kind of like in the middle area. He was supposed to get a little bit lower. My medical prowess is really impressing you, isn't it? Anyway, so, right. They're like, oh, you're fully dilated. I was like, okay, great, but I don't feel the urge to push at all. And from all that I had read, even with an epidural, you're supposed to feel that urge to push and wait to push to that point. So up until this point, I felt like everything had gone so smoothly, flawlessly, really. Couldn't have asked for better. I felt like I was listened to, and my wishes and desires were really accommodated, and the staff there was great, and everything was great. And then the OB on call came in, and she was like, yep, you're ready to go. Let's do some practice pushes. And I was like, practice pushes? And I had just been talking to the nurse who had been with me all night about how, I wanted to wait a little while and see if I got the urge to push. The baby wasn't in distress or anything. He wasn't fully all the way down. And I wanted to just wait a little and to see. And she said that shouldn't be a problem. But the doctor, for whatever reason, it was not my doctor, really wanted me to try. And I'm just the kind of person where I'm a rule follower, you guys, and I listen to authority, and I respect doctors for all of their training and their medical knowledge, which I have none of. But my instinct was to wait a little and see if I got the urge to push. And this is the only part of my delivery story that I would say I wasn't 100% happy with. Because I feel like if they had let me have a little bit more time, that I would have gotten that urge naturally, maybe, or at least it would have given Donny some more time to get a little bit lower, and I wouldn't have had to push for so long, and I wouldn't have torn. Maybe I would have anyway, I don't know, but that was really the only kind of blip in my beautiful birth story. So at 6:30, I started practice pushing, which really wasn't practicing at all, it was really pushing. Now, because I had the epidural, I couldn't get on all fours and I couldn't squat, which were the two positions that I would have done had I not had an epidural, because they're a much more natural way to give birth. It's just easier. Lying flat on your back or even on an incline, is not a natural way to give birth. It's just your tailbone gets in the way. It's difficult to push that way. You don't have the help from gravity. But the epidural was kind of more of a priority for the situation. So I knew I was going to have to try to push, you know, on my back in a bed. So they had me pushing where, you know, one nurse was on each side of me holding a leg. Don was just with his back injury and his shoulder problem. He just couldn't physically hold my body in that way. I know lots of husbands hold a leg. He was just up being my cheerleader up by my head, you know, being a vocal cheerleader. And so they had me pushing with every contraction, which I could tell the contraction. So I always told them when one was coming on, they would check on the monitor and be like, yeah, and then we would push, where I think it was, I'm trying to remember, it's like push for a count of 10, 3 times or 4 times, 3 or 4 times, and then rest between contractions. And they had me all curled up, kind of with holding my legs up, you know, obviously open wide, and pushing. And this went on for 2 hours. That doctor ended up leaving, and the nurses just took over for a long time, and I didn't get any breaks. We didn't let up at all. We just went with it, like every 3 minutes doing this pushing thing with my contractions. And we weren't making any progress. I could tell. The nurses were like, you're doing great, you're making great progress, but I could tell nothing was happening. So at about 8:30, I'd been pushing for 2 hours. I was starting to get really tired. I was still really dehydrated. I was still just weak and tired from not having eaten or slept or done anything really. My OB came in, and she was like, okay, let's do a few pushes together, see how things are going, and then reassess. And I was like, okay, thank God my OB is here, because I really like her and I trust her. So we started pushing. We pushed for maybe about 10-15 minutes in the same way. No, not that long. Maybe just a few, like 10 minutes, not all at once, like a couple of contractions. She was like, okay, we're gonna try something else. So she actually took a bed sheet and she knotted it at each end. She had me hold one end. She held the other kind of away from the bed. And they put my feet in these stirrup things for leverage. I had no feeling in my legs, by the way, from the epidural. And she had me curled over, and she called this Tug-of-War Pushing. And it actually made a difference. It pushed Donny down. So he was much more like further down. So that method of pushing was actually really working. But it was also really physically tiring for me, but more importantly, it was stressing Donny out, in which they can tell from their heart rate. So we did this kind of pushing for maybe about 10 more minutes. It was about 8:45-ish at this point. And my doctor was like, you're progressing really well, but I'm worried about Donny. Let's give this a few more tries, a few more contractions. But if that doesn't work, we're gonna either do the vacuum. We're gonna try the vacuum. And this was something I really didn't want. I know that it works and it can be very helpful and it's fine, but I didn't want that, and I think Donny didn't want it either, because for whatever reason, the next 3 pushes pushed him out. We got him out. No vacuum necessary. I didn't have to have Pitocin. I didn't have to have any interventions aside from the epidural. Ding! It's exactly what I wanted, basically. So Donny was born just after 9 a.m. Like I said, 6 pounds, 14 ounces, and just beautiful. And it was just such a different experience from with Charlotte. After I had Charlotte with C-section, you know, I couldn't hold her. They had the NICU team in there, which is standard protocol for a C-section. So they had, you know, I couldn't even like see her for a while, and then Don had to hold her for a while, and I couldn't really hold her until a couple hours post-surgery. Whereas with Donny, they put him on my chest right away. They do like delayed cord clamping. They do skin to skin, where I had him on me, with me, basically the whole time while we were still in delivery, while I delivered the placenta, which went fine. I did have a 2nd-degree tear, and I have stitches kind of all the way around. Again, not to be too graphic. I tore mostly on one side where I have a lot of stitches, and then I just have a couple of stitches on the other side. And at 3+ weeks postpartum, they're just starting to dissolve. And it's just getting to the point where I don't feel them pulling. So I'll talk more about that in my postpartum update. Anyway, they did all that. I didn't feel any of it because of the epidural. Obviously, they did turn it off at that point, but you know, after they stitched me up and stuff. But I had him on me the whole time, and it was just so nice to be able to have him with me right away. The nurse who was there did take him, I think after about a half an hour of having him on me, just over to the side to weigh him and do his APGAR. He got 9 on both APGAR things. I did the APGAR at 5 minutes and then again an hour, so I don't remember what it is, but he did fine with all of that. Don got to cut the cord. You know, they put his little hat on, they wrapped him in a blanket, they gave him back to me. You know, we tried to breastfeed, but he was very sleepy, he wasn't really into it. It went well later when we did breastfeeding, that went fine. Breastfeeding's actually been going really well this time around. Again, a night and day experience from my experience with Charlotte, and I'll talk about that again in my postpartum update, but it was just really nice, and I felt exhausted but exhilarated and just so blessed that everything went so brilliantly, that we were able to deliver him in the morning. So by the time we got up to like the mother and baby floor, it was probably almost lunchtime, and you know, they take him into the nursery for a little bit to do his hearing test and to do his first bath and some other, you know, some blood work and stuff. And we ordered lunch, and then, you know, by the late afternoon, Don was able to go home and be with Charlotte, and he stayed home with her overnight, and then, you know, in the morning and stuff, and then my in-laws would come back during the day and hang out with her. So the timing just worked out, everything worked out really beautifully, and I just felt like it couldn't have gone better. And our hospital stay was fine. We stayed for 2 additional nights, so the one night that I was laboring, and then 2 additional nights. That was the minimum my doctor would allow. I wanted to go home like right away, and she's like, no, you need to stay. I was like, it's such a different experience with Charlotte. I really wanted to be in the hospital. I didn't feel stable after the C-section. I needed all the help I could get as a first-time mom. We were there for 5 days. With Donny, we were only there for, I would say, 2.5 days. We went home on Thursday, and I was able to see Cece after her afternoon nap. Like, we were home in time to catch her after her nap. So I was only not with her Tuesday and Wednesday, but it felt like forever. I just really wanted to go home, even though the hospital is great and the staff is just so lovely, and it was just went really well. It was really unremarkable hospital stay. Everything went fine. Donny and I did end up going back to the hospital a few days later because he had jaundice, and we had to address that at the hospital, but I'll talk about that in the update as well. Yeah, I was chomping at the bit to go home, and that's basically the whole story. So I feel like I left some stuff out. I know I've been talking forever, so I probably didn't leave that much out, but I can't believe that he's here. It's remarkable. I'm so proud of myself and my body for what it did. I am so proud of my family and grateful for them for stepping in and being so helpful and supportive. I am proud of my husband and so grateful for his support. And he has just been really full on, hands-on with Cece, and so flexible about work, which has been a godsend as we've been adjusting. And I'm so proud and grateful for this little boy, and how he has completed our family. I'm gonna get a little emotional, but my heart feels full. This is it. We're not having any more babies, at least not any more planned babies, and our family feels full. It feels complete, and it's just incredible. Having a newborn isn't the easiest thing ever, and I'll talk again. I'm gonna continue to reference that update, but I'll talk more about that in an update for you guys. But it's not something I would trade for anything in the world, and these are precious precious moments, even the really tough ones that I know I'll never get back, and I'll miss them when they're gone. And like being able to hold your child like this, like you guys, I'm like full out crying now. Like you can't get this back. It's just amazing. And I don't know any of you other moms out there who have, you know, more than one child, but is it just me, or does your toddler suddenly seem like a giant when you get home with a new baby? Like, she seems so big and so mature, and just, anyway. I'll now get questions about how Charlotte's doing with Donny. I'm going to talk about that more in the update. It's been a little touch and go. I mean, she's been fine. She's been really sweet about him, but she's definitely, you know, reacting, and it's a tough transition. She's just 2, so I know it'll be some time before we settle into a nice groove, but we're on the path to that, and we're a family, and it's a beautiful thing. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed meeting Donny. And like I said, I will do an update for him, a 1-month update, and I'll also talk about postpartum. And that will be probably next week, because he already is 1 month old, practically. Well, he is at the time this video is going up, if I can get my act together and edit it. But yeah, this is my new little love, and I thank you guys for your patience and all your kind words and support, and I will see you really soon. Bye, you guys. Take care. Thanks for watching.